Daily news and analysis. We keep you informed and inspired.
This is World Today.
Hello and welcome to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Coming up, Trump and Iran's president sign initial deal to put an end to their war. EU leaders are looking to converge on hardline trade policy towards China. China's western region saw strong foreign trade momentum in the first 5 months. Trump and Modi discuss trade and the safety of Indian sailors in the Gulf region. Can their meeting reset U.S.-India relationship? To listen to this episode again or to catch up on previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching World Today. First up, U.S. President Donald Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian have digitally signed their memorandum of understanding for ending the war. Pakistan, a key mediator, says Iran will immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and the United States will lift its naval blockade as the first step of the deal's implementation. The text released by Iranian media shows that Washington will withdraw troops, launch reconstruction efforts, and lift sanctions. The United States has also unveiled a 14-point full text spelling out provisions for reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and easing financial restrictions while setting out expectations for addressing Iran's nuclear issue during future talks. U.S. President Donald Trump says the Memorandum of Understanding is by no means the end, warning that American attacks will resume if Iran fails to meet its commitments. So for more, joining us now on the line is Dr. He Wenping from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. So thank you very much for joining us, Dr. He.
Thank you for having me, Ding Han.
Okay, so the first paragraph of the agreement notes that the U.S., Iran, and allies will declare an immediate and a permanent termination of military operations on all fronts. However, despite the MOU, Israel's military invasion of Lebanon appear to show no sign of easing. Do you expect the United States to do something to rein in Israel's behavior in the days ahead?
Well, actually, Israel's way, like you said, continue bombing Lebanon, actually make Donald Trump, U.S. president, already not happy. Before, we have been heard that President Donald Trump already gave some warning to Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu, even saying this guy is not easy to handle. So to show his dissatisfaction to Israel's behavior. But to my understanding, I don't think like United States this time around can hold on the Israel's behavior, because Netanyahu had made very clear, saying even this MOU signed between the U.S. and Iran actually has no any this kind of has nothing to do with Israel's. Israel is not being bound about this MOU. Israel is an independent country; they can do whatever they like. He has already showed his dissatisfaction with this kind of MOU reached by U.S. and Iran. So I don't think now in the coming days ahead or this 60 days. Actually, they want to make this MOU failure. They want, like U.S. and Iran cannot reach any deal because to the Israel's concern that the missile issue and including nuclear weapon issue, because U.S. just care about this nuclear weapon of the Iran, but the Israel cares about like missiles and also so-called Iran's military contact with Lebanon, Hezbollah, and also Yemen, Houthi, so on and so forth.
According to another point in the deal, the U.S. and Iran will commit to negotiating and achieving a final deal in a maximum of 60 days, like you mentioned, although that timeline could be extended with mutual consent. Why do you think the two parties have agreed that the timeline could be extended when needed? Is this a sign that their confidence for the negotiations in the foreseeable future is not that strong?
Yes, this is quite obviously to see. Actually, both sides has no strong confidence about, like in the just 60 days can, make all those deals been done. Because all those very thorny issue actually couldn't done in the previous those years, those kind of confrontation between U.S., Israel, and Iran in terms of this nuclear issue. In the Iranian side, they think they have the right to develop a nuclear, those kind of power, not nuclear weapon. Actually, they have never said they will develop a nuclear weapon. Before they didn't say, even said this is not fit with their religion. Make very clear, but they have the right to develop nuclear power. Like they keep saying, they produce power, electricity from those nuclear one. So this is the basic rights being a sovereignty country. Anyway, this is one thing. Another thing is like the Israel said, you should stop all those support, like to Lebanon, Hezbollah, like to Yemen, and then Iraqi, those military forces. So all these regions, which means your influence cannot be there. This is not agreed upon by Iranian side either. Before, when the Pakistan was mediating the talk between United States and Iran, so Iranian said, as long as Israel not stop bombing Lebanon, Hezbollah, and then there's no any possibility to have any talk with the United States. Even at the final point, they cancel their visit to Pakistan. Even though J.C. Vance, the U.S. Deputy President, already public saying they have been leading, he had led the delegation will fly to Pakistan to have second round of talk with Iran. But Iran's determination is very firm because as long as Israel continue bombing Lebanon, there is no talk. So all of this makes this future 60 days, actually, I think this mission seems impossible to make a deal.
The MOU says the U.S. and the regional partners will develop a definitive, mutually agreed plan worth at least $300 billion for reconstruction and economic development in Iran. But in the meantime, a message that we have heard from the U.S. side is that the U.S. is not necessarily, required to pay any money to Iran or contribute to this planned fund. What do you make of the calculation of the Trump administration in this regard? And do you think there can be a final mechanism for this so-called fund?
Yes, this is another thorny issue. We all know Donald Trump is a business person. He is only counting how much U.S. can earn rather than how much U.S. will spend. Of course, there's no way for the United States, especially from Donald Trump administration, to pay the money, saying to Iran for those destruction. So there's no way. But the Iran side has been keep asking, saying you have to pay money because they're short of money now. One hand, they ask about to release all those sanctions on Iran, all the money frozen by the United States and the Western countries should be now give the money back to Iran. They're short of money now. And on the other hand, not only just release the sanction and also unfrozen those money, but on the other hand, they need compensation. At this point, they never give up. But now, I think this Donald Trump already makes some points, from time to time, saying this money, like $300 billion has been mentioned, will come from so-called fund. But this fund, who is doing contribution? Oh my God, it's that all the Middle East countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, you name it. Actually, those countries, they have been also bombed when those military bases of United States based there. And then the Iranian made a retaliation bombing to them, missiles attack. And then they are victims, by the way. But now those victims will pay the compensation fee. You see, this is such ironic things.
Yeah, indeed. That sounds very, very ridiculous from a normal sense, to say the least. So, in the meantime, Dr. He Wenping, do you think the Strait of Hormuz will immediately and fully reopen? I mean, the MOU we are talking about here actually says that in the longer term, Iran will work with Oman and other Gulf states to set up a broader agreement regarding how to manage this very key, crucial waterway. Do you think Iran will gradually lose its leverage on this key waterway?
I don't think Iran will easily losing this leverage because this is very critical for them. By the way, with this MOU from the Iranian side, they want the United States to reopen there because United States already blocked also this Strait of Hormuz, blocked the Iranian, those boat ships get in and out, want to kill Iranians economic, those oil supply, those money supply. But Iranian side want to hold the Hormuz as the cash maker. They want to earn the money together with Oman. So this is their long-term goal. Actually, Iranian parliament already passed a law saying in the future they were going to really in charge of this Strait of Hormuz, but they didn't say, well, okay, we will close it. And then every ships or boat passed by will pay the money to the Iran or Oman. They just mentioned that clearly, but they are saying they will do some management, well, will offer some service, saying for supporting all those ships pass through this waterway, and then some boats, some ships need to pay service fee in a very this so-called smart way to express this wishes to collect money. So this is the already make us some relevant law. So I don't think now after this MOU being signed, saying, okay, as Donald Trump said, immediately open. Well, this is my victory. Everything he wants to say, this is his victory. Now all this Strait of Hormuz issue now has been resolved. This is he want to make some credit on his own head. But Iranian side makes some detailed explanation, saying this is just the U.S. blockade now has been no longer there. So this is their victory. So in the future, they will together talk this issue with Oman, how to manage this, waterway. So you see, we will wait and see how it will come.
Let's wait and see indeed. As part of the MOU, Iran has agreed not to procure or buy a nuclear weapon. And as you suggested earlier, Dr. He Wenping, this is by no means a new promise. This is by no means a new pledge made by Tehran. So in a bigger picture sense, Dr. He, as you look at the detailed text of this MOU, do you think the United States or the Trump administration has gained anything by launching this war with Iran?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think Donald Trump has gained anything. You can see now from this MOU and also from those promises made by Iran, actually all those promises saying not procure, not get a nuclear weapon, this kind of promise, they have been made a long, 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 long ago. They never said they will have a nuclear weapon. So this is not new. But something new is after this war, the U.S. and Israel are together bombing on Iran. Now the new issue coming up, that is the close of the Strait of Hormuz. Before the war, that the Strait of Hormuz is open. So free to all the countries, their boats and the ships go through there without any problem. So not cause anything to the international supply of chain, not cause anything like oil price soaring, and then always coming up with those news released by White House or here and there, or sometimes up and then down and then up and down. So it's based on all those so-called some information released from White House. Actually, maybe some company, they earn a lot. They knows what time this information will be released. But actually, global economy has been suffering all the time in those 3 months also, from the end of February all the way until now, almost 4 months. So actually, the new problem all come up from this bombing. So now you are saying you resolve this Strait of Hormuz issue. By the way, we just analyze this, not fully resolved. Just temporarily saying, okay, all those blockades now lifted, no longer there. That is new added after this war. So now back to the original point. Actually, before the original point, everything remained there. So-called nuclear issue, so-called like enrichment of uranium. You see, Iranian side didn't say, okay, hand it over. All those enriched uranium to the United States. Never. They said no. So Donald Trump didn't get anything. Even now, the promise in the coming 60 days and even 30 days, starting from 30 days U.S. military bases, will withdraw from those Middle East area. Well, this is something, you see, Iranian got. Before the war, okay, U.S. deployed a lot of troops around circulating Iran. But now, after this war, Iranian get another new point. That is, U.S. should live in this area. You see, who win, who lost. It's quite obvious.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us. Dr. He Wenping joining us from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. This is World Today. We'll be back. You are listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. The 27 leaders of the European Union are gathering in the city of Brussels for a 2-day summit. A key agenda for the meeting is to have a debate regarding the so-called shockwaves from the Chinese economy. Earlier this week, EU trade chief official Maroš Šefčovič said that the bloc's trading relationship with China had reached a point that required a reset, adding that the status quo was not sustainable. Late last month, China's foreign ministry accused the European Union of cherry-picking data to justify its claims regarding imbalanced trade. So joining us now on the line is Liang Lingling, Director of Communication and Research, joining us from the China Chamber of Commerce to the European Union. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So why do you think recently, especially, the EU is getting tough on trade with China?
Well, you are quite right. Here in Brussels, the debate over the so-called China shock has clearly reached a boiling point. And everyone sees it in the media coverage, think tank reports, and political discussions. And many Europeans are quite anxious about the EU's own sluggish growth, weak investment, and declining industrial competitiveness. And China, unfortunately, has become an easy explanation for problems that are, in many cases, deeply structural and European-made. Whether the EU would take get tougher, in reality, or to take the very dangerous first step towards a trade war with China remains to be seen. But the current discussion, the current atmosphere is quite worrying, I have to say. And we hope that, the political anxiety should not be allowed to override the economic reality.
Yeah. Now, many people on the EU side are actually pointing to this. Last year, for the first time, all 27 EU member states posted a trade deficit with China. Even countries like Germany was not an exception. Does this necessitate a feeling of worry and anxiety for the EU side, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, the trade deficit by itself is not a very scientific indicator of dependency or economic harm. It could be extremely misleading if it's taken out of context. And the EU itself is a victim to the trade measures adopted by Washington under the disguise of the dealing with trade deficits as well, for instance. So the trade today is not simply about one country selling the final products to another. In the China-EU's case, a large share of the imports from China are inputs that support the European manufacturing, and the affordable Chinese components, equipment, and materials they help the European companies to control the cost and to help them remain competitive and stay into the global value chain. So what we want to say is that the real question is not whether about the European imports from China. The real question is whether the Europe has enough investment, innovation, and industrial capacity of its own. And to simply blame China will not help solve the EU's own competitiveness problem.
Ling, I guess you know much better than I do. I mean, for quite some time, our perception here in China is that, okay, over there in Europe, some EU member states favor a more assertive, tough stance regarding trade with China, while others are more hesitant. Has there been a fundamental change in this bigger political picture?
You are quite right, but I think the picture currently remains mixed. And you're also absolutely right when you mention that EU member states have different stances. I think fundamentally it's because that they have different economic explosion to China, different industrial interests, and in some cases, very different mindsets, very different traditions. Some member states are in favor of fair and free trade, and some are more protectionist orientated in some cases, and some could be more provoking, and so on and so on. So the diversity is quite a feature of the EU that we all know that Brussels often calls for unity, but sometimes it's not very easy to achieve itself in a lot of discussions, in a lot of policy making and decision making as well. But it really is subject to the procedures. If we talk about the measures, whether it needs the simple majority to reach some kind of agreement to move forward, or it needs unanimity. So let's say that in a lot of cases that the Commission can still be able to move forward if you gather enough support. So I would not say that what you mentioned. I would not say that what you mentioned that there's a kind of fundamental change. There's a united front against China, or the opposite. It's always quite a mixed picture. It remains so in the current discussion as well.
We understand currently European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she is seeking to trigger a so-called anti-coercion instrument against China. Do you think she is going to manage to get enough political support for this particular gesture? From China's perspective, how would you look at this possible anti-coercion instrument against China?
At this stage, I won't be able to verify what you mentioned that President von der Leyen wanted to proceed with the anti-coercion instrument. This is quite a powerful one that the EU developed over the past few years. And it hasn't been taken out of the tool yet to target any country. We heard a lot of debates or discussions urging Brussels to use it. The instrument itself was designed at the very first beginning for the EU to strike back against the US measures. So we don't know. So first of all, I cannot verify whether the president really intends to use this. Okay. But I would say that in case if it is the case, that will be a very, very dangerous step, and I think it will, because it's not. I don't think the EU is in a position to take this instrument in the first place, because China did not initiate any tariff hikes, or it did not introduce by itself on specific trade measures towards the EU. So I don't think EU is in the right position to initiate this instrument at this stage. But on the other hand, we heard that a lot of discussion about what options that the Brussels or the EU bubble has at this stage, apart from the anti-coercion instrument. There are also some discussions about, for instance, to have the safeguard measures and to introduce quota for some products, and or have some, for instance, what the Paris pursues is like to have a EU version of the 301 investigation to deal with overcapacity, like what the US did with the EU itself. So it's all discussions are very interesting. All the discussion at this stage are quite worrying, I would say. It's not interesting, it's just worrying, because, as I said, that China is not in a position to initiate this trade tension, and we do hope that the EU will not initiate as well.
Thank you very much for joining us. Liang Lingling joining us from the China Chamber of Commerce to the European Union. You're listening to World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. We'll be back after a very short break. You're back with World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng has pledged to steadily expand institutional opening up in the country's financial sector. He made the pledge at the 2026 Lujiazui Forum held in Shanghai. He Lifeng said that faced with global governance challenges, multilateralism and mutual respect are the only right path. He has also warned against improper unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdictions, saying that China is going to legislate countermeasure provisions. For more on this, my colleague Gao Yingshi earlier spoke with Liu Zhiqing, Senior Research Fellow with the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies, Renmin University of China.
The 2026 Lujiazui Forum opened in Shanghai, with He Lifeng saying that faced with global governance challenges, multilateralism and mutual respect are the only right path. How do you read the message Beijing is sending?
I think from this conference, Beijing is sending very strong and a positive signal to the global market. First, as we know that China is remaining opening up. And also, we honor our commitment to further taking reform, especially in all fronts of the economic development, including manufacturing side, including financing side, including the other scientific cooperations. In this way, that China remains to open its market, to open its cooperations opportunities, and create more channels and opportunities with foreign investors. So that's why we see that this is a very important message to the whole world. Many countries now are very happy to see the policy announcement and also implication of the government standards. So in this conference has already reached its target and purpose.
He pledged to steadily expand institutional opening up in finance and welcome global institutions to deepen their presence in China. How significant is this commitment for foreign investors?
As we know, for foreign investors, the most important precondition is that whether economic environment is very stable, very friendly, and also political environment is very safe and stable. I think China has already met all these two basic priorities that foreign investors are looking for. Because for those foreign investors, confidence always coming from the stability of the policy making and the policy implications. That shows the institutional opening up will assure that the foreign investors have more access possibilities to communicate with Chinese government, Chinese institutions, and also with the professional departments in order to get support, policy explanation, and also the more market access opportunity. So this openness for institutions, key element for China's modernization, but also very important for foreign investors because they have more confidence, the more opportunities, and the more chances to make profits and benefits from China's openness.
He said that against unilateral sanctions, China will legislate blocking and countermeasures provisions, insisting that China does not stir up trouble but is not afraid of trouble. What do you make of this legal posture, and who is it aimed at?
I think that this is a very important question. Many people are always trying to know. China always very firmly announced its legal posture that we don't care or we are not afraid of any troubles made by external forces or powers. Because as we know that in the past, according to China's experience, even we try to meet those that unreasonable requirements from some foreign powers, but we didn't get the respect from the other side. This is the point and the lessons for China and also for the rest of the world. So we should not and we will not stir up troubles. But it doesn't mean that we are afraid of trouble. This is totally different. China is ready and always that efforts to have close cooperation with all partners all over the world. including those that who were not so friendly to China, but still we show our kindness and willingness to cooperate with them. But in fact, we find that some foreign powers and companies trying to make troubles, make more difficult for the cooperation, especially to restrain and contain China's development with different ways. So this is the main challenge, not only for Chinese companies, but also for the rest of the world. Of course, we know that for foreign investors, for foreign companies, they know the result negatively to their own, but under some political pressure, these companies and persons have to make such performance. But we are feeling that quite upset with these differences we made.
He said after 3 years of efforts, risks in local government debt, small banks, and real estate have eased, with high-risk local financial institutions down 70% since 2022. How convincing is this picture?
I think we can see that all this potential or some the risks have been already settled or eased. This is the fact from the two factors. One is that our economic development of GDP remain quite satisfactory because in the first quarter and the last year, we already achieved around 5%. This is also really the best in the world. And secondly, from the forecast for the rest of the year, we have already developed our AI and the technology field and the cooperation with our other partners, achieved more positive result. So we can see from the holiday festivals in China, we find that domestic consumption is booming, that has become the major support force for our economic development. So all these efforts we have made in the 3 years have already made a very good positive fruits, and also the result is well being seen by the global market. That's why so many foreign visitors come to China, foreign investors come to China to have more investment, show their confidence in China. So this is really a very important that we can convince the whole global market and also whole market that to have more investment, to have more cooperation in China.
Alongside the forum, 6 major domestic banks will pilot offshore RMB forex trading in the Shanghai Free Trade Zone, part of a broader push to build the city into a global RMB hub. How important is this step for the RMB internationalization?
As we know that the renminbi internationalization has been already discussed for some years. Why? Because we have two challenges. The first is the uncertainty of the global market. We know that the global reserve currencies have already made great troubles and the pressures on the market development. So they made uncertainty and subcharge to other currencies. This will make more pressure on the China's development and also on the developing countries. So that's why renminbi is well performed in the past years, has gained high respect in the market because of two things. One is the stable value. The second is the pricing mechanism is very reasonable for many countries and partners. They could really understood and understand this policy and also make a good forecast and benefits from the renminbi internationalization. Secondly, when the geopolitical conflicts remain a big challenge for the stabilizing of the world global payment system, the renminbi internationalization will help to make more possibilities, give more options for some countries that to avoid some risky currencies as a payment tool. So in this, we should strengthen our efforts that to promote renminbi internationalization, especially in the international trade financing and trade payment, because this is a good supplementary tool that beside the other currencies. When we see Middle East conflict, we see some problem from the US dollar payment, from Japanese yuan, from other currencies, turbulences. Now renminbi is still very stable. This is really well recognized and accepted by the global market. So this is very important for renminbi to further strengthen its position and also to to further have more efforts for internationalization, make more contributions to stabilize the world trade business.
That was Liu Zhiqing, Senior Fellow of Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies, Renmin University of China, speaking with my colleague Gao Yingshi. This is World Today. We'll be back. You're listening to World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. Western China's foreign trade has seen strong growth so far this year. Foreign trade value across the country's 12 western provincial level regions in the first 5 months reached a record high of more than 2 trillion yuan, or nearly 300 billion US dollars, up by more than 18% year on year. Private enterprises remain the major driving force, while trade with the Belt and Road Initiative partner countries accounted for over 60% of the total trade volume. The Western Chinese region now contributes more than 11% of the national foreign trade growth. So for more, my colleague Xu Yawen earlier spoke with Professor Liu Baochen from the University of International Business and Economics.
Professor, speaking of Western China for our audiences who may not be very familiar with this vast area, it's divided into 6 provinces such as Sichuan, Yunnan province, and also 5 autonomous regions including Xinjiang and Xizang autonomous region, and also 1 direct administered municipality which is Chongqing. So help us understand how impressive that is for Western China to achieve this trade performance.
Yes, geographically, Chinese territory takes a roster shape where you can really draw a vertical line in the middle part and western part would be there. Over the years, during the Chinese reform and open door process, we adopted a stage-by-stage approach where the coastal areas have been there to enjoy more of the preferential policies, and because they are better connected with the rest of the world. And now China has been pushing for Western development. So this policy drive leads to, number one, better physical connectivity. And second is that when China is going for high quality development, the unique advantage in western part of China in terms of minerals, in terms of large land mass to be able to culminate the new energy facilities like solar panels, wind turbines, etc. They are also, exercising a unique advantage in this new scenario. Over the years, because the income level has been higher in the coastal area, the western part has been suffering a sort of a brain drain, but we do notice more of those young generation are coming back to be able to build up their own businesses, particularly in the area for e-commerce, by taking advantage also of the Belt and Road Initiative. They are able to boost more of those private companies from the micro businesses now to a sizable ones. The disadvantage is now turning into more of a sort of a unique advantage for them. And they also have a strong connection with the coastal area in terms of the energy supply, because they generate more energy and they can really send through the ultra voltage transmission lines to those the bigger cities and coastal industrial zones, so that they can also get a benefit out of it. Now the green development is now shifting its new focus for the western part to be able to be part of the Chinese business community in their international drive, but also, having more advantage to bring more of the productivity and also livelihood to their own people.
Official data shows that Western China's total import and export volume reached a record high in the first 5 months of the year, growing 18.5% year on year. It also marks 6 consecutive months of double-digit growth. So could you walk us through the main factors driving this sustained expansion?
Based on my research, such a sustained expansion reflects 3 main drivers. First, the Western China is becoming better connected with not only the rest of China, but also the rest of the world through railways, highways, air cargo, bounded zones, and cross-border logistic corridors. And this is really the basis to have the physical connectivity. Second, it is the industrial base that is upgrading with stronger exports in machinery, electronics, new energy products, and agricultural goods, and together with the cross-border e-commerce. Now it really reflects a general trend for production reallocation from the coastal regions, joined both by Chinese business community and also foreign business community to move along to identify the refreshed advantages in terms of labor supply, infrastructure, and also the policy privileges offered by the western part of China. Thirdly, the dynamics of the global trade is still very resilient. So therefore, to take advantage by the western part of China on the Belt and Road, and this is really reflects a sustainable type of growth rather than a short-term rebound. So therefore, the overall, the Western China is getting deeper integration with the inland region and also into the international supply chains.
And also, Professor, data shows over 60% of Western China's total foreign trade value came from trade with BRI partner countries in the first 5 months. So how has deepening cooperation with these economies become a key engine of Western trade growth?
Yes, BRI is charted along two roads. One is the over the land roads, which we normally call the Silk Road. And the other would be the maritime roads that's there to connect with the all the way to Africa through the sea roads. So now the Silk Road, which is really the land connection, which really is now becoming a big land bridge for taking advantage of the Western China to be able to get well connected with Central Asia, all the way to Western Europe through particularly the Chinese fast train freight routes. And in the meantime, the western part of China is also connected on the maritime road all the way to ASEAN, and they can take advantage of air transportation and also the river roads, etc. So this is really operated on a very costly base, very well cost-effective basis. So better logistics and also the customs facilitation, particularly by the initiation of the digitization along many of those administrative regions are there to facilitate the paperwork with all the exporters. So therefore, this is something that's very advantageous. The other, you will also notice that in the figure that the imports has already beaten the exports in terms of the growth rate. So it means that when the income level is getting steadily increased in the western part of China, so the consumption power is also there to be advantageous to many global partners to penetrate into the deeper region of the China.
Professor, we have also noted that the number of enterprises with import and export activity in Western China reached 39,000 and up 18.5% year on year, with private enterprises accounting for more than 90% of the new players. How do you interpret this trend? What role have private companies played in driving Western China's robust foreign trade performance?
Well, it shows that Chinese export drive is still highly market-driven instead of, as many have really assumed, that Western part is highly dependent on the government directions or government subsidies. So private companies are especially important because they are very flexible and they are cost conscientious, and also they are very quick to respond to the new market demand. And they are also strong in the cross-border e-commerce, specialized the manufacturer, and also they are able to grab the niche markets they can identify. So the growing participation means that Western trade is no longer dominated by large state projects or state-owned firms. They are now having a broader base of shaping an industrial cluster that sustain their competitive advantage.
Professor Liu Baozhen, Director of the Center for International Business Ethics, joining us from the University of International Business and Economics, speaking with my colleague Xu Yawen. This is World Today. We'll be back. You're back with World Today. I'm Ding Hen in Beijing. U.S. President Donald Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi have tried to defuse escalating tensions over the killing of 3 Indian sailors off the coast of Oman. The two leaders held a meeting in France on Wednesday. Trump said Washington and New Delhi will continue to work together on this issue. Modi expressed his hope that the safety of sailors will receive the highest priority during the implementation of the U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding for ending their war. Relations between the United States and India have deteriorated after American forces fired missiles last week at a Palau-flagged vessel, killing 3 Indian nationals. U.S. forces claim that the vessel violated an American blockade on Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz. Trump and Modi also discussed the trade in their meeting. So for more, joining us now on the line is Sultan Ali, a retired Air Force officer and author in Pakistan. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're most welcome. I'm very happy to be on your show.
So, first of all, do you expect this meeting between Trump and Modi to reverse this recent deterioration in the U.S.-India relationship?
Well, my brother, the Trump-Modi meeting offers at best a limited reversal of the recent downturn in U.S.-India relations. The optics of the dialogue are definitely valuable, but they cannot erase the structural irritants that continue to define the relationship. Divergence on trade, defense procurement, and India's insistence on strategic autonomy mean that ties cannot be reset overnight. At the heart of the matter lies an underlying mistrust. Washington often expects alignment, while New Delhi prioritizes sovereignty and independent decision-making. This gap in expectations ensures that even warm personal chemistry between leaders cannot substitute for substantive convergence. The meeting, therefore, carries a symbolic value more than transformative substance. It reassures audiences that dialogue continues, but whether the relationship can move beyond rhetoric depends on both sides reconciling competing priorities, balancing America's push for market access and strategic alignment with India's protection of domestic industries and independent foreign policy. Until that reconciliation occurs, the relationship will remain cordial in appearance but cautious in practice.
Sultan, how would you understand this feeling of widespread anger that's the killing by American forces of 3 Indian sailors, including the initial U.S. response to this incident has triggered in India? And as you look at the killing of Indian sailors, this particular incident, do you think it in any way resembles the rift between Washington and New Delhi when it comes to New Delhi's purchase of Russian oil?
Okay, you see, the death of the Indian sailors have struck deeply at India's national sentiment, touching both its sense of sovereignty and sacrifice. Because you see, ordinary Indians, they look at it as not just as a maritime tragedy, but as an affront to national dignity. And it has naturally fueled widespread public anger. Now, the situation was aggravated by what many in India saw as a U.S. misstep, Washington's delayed and muted response. That hesitation was perceived as dismissive, reinforcing the impression that Indian lives were undervalued in the calculus of a strategic partner. And this episode has widened the trust deficit between the two countries. It demonstrates how quickly public opinion can sour when strategic partner appears insensitive to human loss. For India, respect and recognition are as important as military cooperation or trade deals. Unless Washington learns to respond with empathy and urgency in such crises, the relationship will remain vulnerable to sudden shocks. Now, as to the second part of your question, the killing of Indian sailors and the controversy over Russian oil imports may appear unrelated, but actually they share a parallel in perception. Both episodes highlight India's insistence on autonomy and Washington's tendency to apply pressure on New Delhi. For India, these are reminders that sovereignty cannot be compromised, whether in economic choices or in matters of national honor. At the same time, the context differ sharply. Oil imports were about economic sovereignty, India's right to secure affordable energy despite Western sanctions. Now, the sailors' death, however, are about human tragedy and national dignity, is striking at the emotional core of Indian society. The common thread is the way Indian opinion interprets Washington's actions, as disregard for India's core interest, whether in trade, energy, or human loss. The perception of insensitivity deepens mistrust. This is why symbolic gestures alone cannot repair ties. The United States must demonstrate respect for India's sovereignty and empathy for its sacrifices if the partnership is to endure.
Now, actually, on Tuesday this week, Hali, the Pentagon in Washington dropped Indo from the U.S. Pacific Command and reverted to its original name. We know the previous name change took place during the first administration of President Donald Trump, right? So what is your reading of this change?
Well, you have highlighted a very, very important issue. The Pentagon's decision to drop Indo from the U.S. Pacific Command carries the weight of a symbolic downgrade, diluting the emphasis once placed on India's role in Washington's strategic calculus. For years, the Indo-Pacific framed elevated New Delhi as a central partner in balancing China's rise. India's poor performance in the limited war against Pakistan last year also contributed to New Delhi's importance as a strategic partner of the U.S. having been downgraded. So this change reflects a strategic recalibration. Washington appears to be narrowing its focus back to the Pacific, signaling shifting priorities that may place a less emphasis on India's role in the broader regional architecture. For New Delhi, the move inevitably stirs concern. At a time when relations with Washington are already strained, the renaming reinforces fears of being sidelined or downgraded in America's strategic hierarchy. A balanced reading, however, suggests that this is not a rupture, but a cooling of enthusiasm. The Indo-Pacific framework once symbolized India's elevated importance, and its dilution now underscores the limits of alignment. Dialogue continues, but the symbolism points to a more cautious phase in U.S.-India ties.
Indeed. And actually, another development of this recent Trump-Modi meeting is that Trump claimed that they made significant progress on U.S.-India trade deal, but I guess realistically, it's not that difficult. It's not that easy, rather, for the two parties to reach a trade deal. But thank you very much for joining us, Sultan Ali, a retired Air Force officer and author in Pakistan. Unfortunately, that's all the time for this edition of World Today. To listen to this episode again or to catch up on our previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching for World Today. I'm Ding Han in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.